annual candidates forum. Okay, and before we get into introductions and move on, I wanted to just tell you a little bit about Maplewood Senior Share, because we've been organized now about 3 years. Our main thrust is to increase and improve services for seniors throughout the town. We've done a ton of research, and we know what we would like to do in terms of improving those services. Little cards are on your table. This was designed by one of our local residents and I. And this little statement on the bottom is pretty much what we stand for. Bridging generations, building community. Because we feel that unless we have everybody in the community working with us, senior issues do not get advanced. Matter of fact, when we went to, not this last meeting with the Grata Foundation, but the previous one, they really requested using our logo. And we said, no, it's patented. It's not, of course, but we really want to hold on to that, because I think that the people who have engaged themselves in Maplewood Senior Share are really interested in providing vital services to the community. Not just the kinds we have been getting up to this point. Okay, so one thing that we have started is a volunteer app that will help us identify where all seniors are in town, okay? And what we need more than anything with that search is this. We need to go door-to-door canvassing to get that information, okay? We will use the app on any device that's had, and you'll be trained to use it, but we need the people going door to door. Okay, and I'm not going to get into too much description about that app. I just can tell you that what we want to use it for is emergency situations with seniors, and also determining how we can provide Meals on Wheels and other services to seniors who really need them. Okay? So there are 2 sheets at each side of the room, so sometime this morning, please sign in and indicate whether you are willing to be part of this volunteer search for seniors. Okay? And I think that's all I want to say. I just want then to turn it over to Ed, who's been with our organization before and talked with us, and he's going to continue this conversation.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
My mother calls me Edgar. She doesn't call me Ed. Though sometimes she calls me something else, but that becomes very personal. I'm going to serve today as your moderator, and I welcome you here. I'm glad to see such a good turnout. I have just a couple of personal comments, and then we're going to move forward. It struck me as we were approaching this that this is a forum. It's not a debate. And it became critical for me to say that because in our current national environment, we've kind of lost sight of a sense of civility and what it means to be community. Because the bottom line is, when all is said and done, we're still going to live here, hopefully. We're still going to have to collaborate and work together. And so there was some minor discussion with the candidates about whether or not we would get into national issues. And my feeling was that no, this is a local discussion. That we need to remain connected to each other and to be able to civilly have discourse as we go forward. So that's really the only layer that I felt was important to put on this. Any response to kind of the national debacle should really only be put within the framework of how we can do better as a community and continue to support and enrich each other. So that's my commentary, and I think both of them have agreed that that made some degree of sense and that they could keep with that. So with that, I just want to tell you that we are going to start off with a 6 to 8 minute presentation from each of the candidates so they can tell you who they are, give you a sense of their vision and what they can do for us. And in typical Democratic style, Mike, do you want to call it?
Let's go heads.
And it's tails. So we're going.
I get to see that.
Did I say Democratic or Republican? So if you don't know the candidates, Mike Summerskill
Yep.
and Frank McGehee.
Yes.
So we're going to start with Frank. They're each going to present for up to 8 minutes. Then we're going to open the floor for your questions. And if you, for some reason, feel that you don't want to verbalize your question, there are cards on each of your tables that you can write them down. I'll collect them. But beyond that, my primary role is going to be keeper of the time and to keep us focused a bit. So, Frank?
Great. Yeah, thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. My name is Frank McGehee, and I'm the Democrat nominee for Township Committee. I first want to thank Irene Dunsavage and Kurt Kiley and the Senior Share Organization for putting this on this morning. I also want to thank Art for opening up his beautiful home. I've been very involved in Maplewood for a long time. I've been active with the Library Foundation Board. I've been active with the Coalition on Race, and basically in the recent unfortunate news in the New York Times, there's no better time to talk about the importance of our Coalition on Race. I've been active in keeping a village, the Chief Foundation, as well as the Tuscan PTA. And I've been active in all these organizations because it's important to me, and goes back to my family values, of contributing time and energy to our community, making a better Maplewood. My platform that I've been talking about for the last, I guess now, since really February, it goes back, is pedestrian safety, shared services, and responsible development. And really, it started with pedestrian safety. That has really been the construct for me. It comes back to the days of walking my daughter to Tuscan, or just walking myself to the train. It comes back to those moments when, like, I'm running with fellow neighbors and cars are going exceedingly fast and almost killing us as we run down Ridgewood Road. And you know, there's an opportunity for us to address that, and how we will enforce our traffic laws and work with our pedestrians to keep them safe, and also work with our homeowners in terms of ways to make sure they keep their landscape and their hedges clean and keep our walkways safe. But for me, being part of community service and municipal government is nothing new. Before I moved here, I lived in Newton, Massachusetts, and I was a member of the Economic Development Commission, where we were focused on trying to bring small businesses, new and existing, into our town. And we would support them and promote them so they would survive. And the new businesses, we worked on finding ways that they fit into the construct of the villages that we had. We had 13 villages in Newton, Massachusetts. And that was important as well, because we wanted to make sure that we brought in the right businesses so our residents had the right amenities to enjoy their town. And also why? Because it helped with the tax burden too. Increased our ratables as well. And also it brought jobs to their local economy. But even before Newton, Massachusetts, I've been very involved. I really started way back at the University of Notre Dame, where I majored in accounting. While I was there, I served 3 years on student government, student senate, in charge on the club commission. And as a senior, I was the president of the club commission. And as president of the club commission, I was in charge of a budget. I was in charge of the student activities fund, which was a 6-figure budget, which also inclusive of every club and organization on campus. So my job was to subsidize whatever funds or fees they were taking from students and allocate this amongst over 100 various clubs and organizations.
I hate whoever's driving the Cayenne, that's me. I need to. But you'll then.
We'll take a 30-second time out.
Want to move?
It's a forum, so it's fluid. We're good. We're good. Thank our sponsor, Art, for this. And going back though, but at the University of Notre Dame, you know, having that accountability and responsibility for allocating money, you know, that was through student fees to a budget that really was inclusive of every student on campus, be it the fencing team to the choir to the NAACP organization. But once I graduated from the University of Notre Dame, I went into financial services. I was in commercial lending for 4 years. In addition to that, I also served as a baseball coach for Babe Ruth Baseball League on the south side of Chicago. That was important because, you know, my parents always talked about giving back even when you had, and so I continued to give back even at that point. But also, I still had ties to the University of Notre Dame, and I served on the National Alumni Board, the Black Alumni Board Notre Dame initially, for 3 years, giving back to my university. But knew that education was important, and my family education was very important. So I actually went back and received an MBA. I received a full fellowship, scholarship to get an MBA at the University of Wisconsin. That's actually where I met my wife, Marie, who's here this morning. Wave, Marie. So if you love me, you can thank Marie for us being here. If you don't, you can go ahead and say our thanks for afterwards. We moved here because when we were looking for places to stay in New Jersey, because my wife received a wonderful career opportunity, we gravitated back to Maplewood because essentially for us, we found this town to have all the amenities that we desired. Now, Maplewood's not perfect, and we boast about our diversity, we boast about all the great amenities, but there's a lot of work to be done, and that's why we're having this forum today. We've had several forums to talk about this, we knock on doors in our community. But, you know, we do have to think about some of the great attributes that Maplewood has. You know, the education, the diversity, the close proximity to town. And then we got to talk about our seniors and the importance of having age-friendly and age inclusion. And what's important is to make sure that our seniors can have the ability to stay in their housing or have the proper housing. It's important for safety. Our seniors got to feel safe, and also walkability to amenities as well. So these are important attributes as well that we have to keep in mind when we think about, you know, diversity, because it's generational diversity that we want. And if I'm elected to Township Committee, I'm going to focus hard on that inclusivity and transparency and inclusion. Inclusion of race, ethnic background, as well as age and gender. So thank you so much, and Ed, you have the floor.
So as you figured out, I'm Mike Summersgill. Thank you all for coming. Again, Art for hosting, Senior Sheriff for putting this forum on. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak. I especially appreciate having a little bit longer introduction, which is nice. If you've seen the other debates, we've had about 2 minutes, and so we had to go right into vision and what we want for the town. So I'll give a little bit more time about my background, because I think it's relevant to what I look to bring to the community. And then I'll close out with a little bit of my vision as it relates to providing services for the members of our town over the age of 60. We haven't found a good word for that population yet. We don't like seniors, we don't like elderly. Maybe I'll say our esteemed population, but you'll know who I'm talking about. So I started, I guess, my professional career as a supervisor of a union workforce in South Plainfield, New Jersey, working for Airborne Express, which was then bought by DHL Express. And so I had to quickly learn every address, every street, every town, in about a 17 town radius. And so that really taught me about working inside of a union contract. It was my first foray really into management and learning about, you know, having to be firm but fair with your employees, understanding that your job is to give them what they need so that they can do their jobs. And so from that role as a supervisor of, I think it was about 20 employees, I moved up to being a cartage manager in Manhattan. So I ran a bike messenger station in southern Manhattan by the World Trade Center after the towers had fell. And it was a totally different workforce. This was a group who was not committed to it as a career. This was a stopping point on their way to something else. And so you had to learn how to work with that group and motivate them and get the most out of their skill set. From there, I ended up running all of outbound operations for New York for DHL Express. So basically every package that was picked up in Manhattan was being picked up by a guy that, or a woman that worked for my organization. And I learned quickly that there was no room for error. You had to make the airplane, and you had to have processes in place to eliminate the chance for error. So it wasn't just having quality control, but also having a process that really was designed to make sure that was effective. And then from there, I went into work for a large outsourcing company. Primarily, my first client was a large law firm in New York City. There, I quickly learned that what I thought I knew about service, I had to take up another notch. The expectations in the firm were that much higher for quality service. And that was my first experience with a 24/7 operation. It was about 100 people on-site and off-site. From there, I moved into a role as a national role. So I suddenly had 60 locations around the US where I was responsible for delivering services. It was almost 330 people. What I found most interesting about that role was the impact of local ordinances and how they impact local businesses, because I essentially had to run my business 60 different ways in 60 different municipalities, whether it was paid time off, minimum wage. The drug testing laws were a nightmare, so just to give you a flavor of that. So when you had, marijuana legalized in say, Oregon, and then I had employees that worked in Oregon, we still had to test for marijuana because it was a federal statute that you had to have federal drug testing standards. So then you would have someone who's doing something legally, but then you would fire them for failing a drug test. Or then you would have someone that would work in Seattle and they would go to Oregon for the weekend, do it legally and come back. And how do you handle that? So it gets very complicated very quickly. But it really gave me a sense of how you have to understand these ordinances in the context of doing business. From there, I had the opportunity to be the head of the entire North American organization, and that was almost 700 people that I was responsible for on a day-to-day basis, and really making sure that we took care of them as an organization and we took care of our clients. So that took you through probably about 12 years of my career. And it's interesting because then I kind of left all that in April, and now I started working more of a technology company, getting back to my roots in engineering, which I attended Cornell University. It's actually been my probably biggest support group in town as I've knocked on doors. The Cornell thing really has stuck. So if there's any Cornellians here, thank you. It's been great for the support. So anyway, so my background says engineering, operations. It's about doing what you say you're going to do, having a process to make sure that we don't mess it up along the way, that you report back on what you're going to do, how it went, what we could do better. And all those are things I feel like government is ripe for. And our town is not unique in that need, but this is the piece of the world that I feel like I could control. And so I'm looking for that opportunity to bring that expertise to government to make sure that we all get the services that we expect. And where we fall short, we communicate that too, and that we're having an open and honest conversation with our town. And so for where that's clear to me was, I guess it was Friday, I attended the Age-Friendly Communities Subcommittee on Governance for how we're going to frame this town as well as South Orange and make it an age-friendly community for many people in our community. And so what I saw from there is we really need an advocate for our population over the age of 60, and we need a committee that will also support that to bring voice to that population, but we need accountability, and that's what I'm looking to bring, especially to senior services. It's got to be owned by someone higher up in our government chains. Right now it's sitting buried in recreation, and I'd be happy if I was elected to be that sponsor on the township committee. And I hope to have an opportunity to do that. So today I'm looking forward to your questions. I think it should be a fun discussion. I was hoping for a couple more of the high schoolers, but I guess things haven't changed much since I was in high school on a Saturday morning. All right, we got two. Good. Thank you for coming. I'm really interested in your perspective. So please, your equals at the in the room, so speak up, and we want to hear from you. So
Great.
Thanks.
Great. I want to thank you both for being so amazingly succinct. Both hitting the 6-minute mark. Very well. But I'm going to ask each of you to take another 30 seconds and give us your elevator speech while you've shared your experiences, etc. 30 seconds and just tell us why those experiences are going to serve us well.
Sure, absolutely. For myself, Ed, it's important to understand that, in a democracy, you can't be an individual. You have to be one of many and have a conversation and have agreements and disagreements and work in a collective environment. This includes listening and also having, I would say, a discussion that may not necessarily be an agreement, but just a discussion finding middle ground. A lot of questions have been talked about. Well, we have so many Democrats already, on the township committee. Well, that's great, but I'm my own voice, and I bring a voice that's unique. I mean, people who've been in this town forever know that it's not very often that you get, Mayor Profeta and Mayor DeLuca to agree on some person. And that's me. That's a precedent. But that's because, as I've told many people that, I'm my own voice, and I have my own ideas, and I want to vet them through the process. And hopefully, they'll be adapted into an ordinance. But if not, let's go ahead and take some of those ideas and transcend them from there.
All right. Great. Knocking on doors, I'm getting good at the 30-second speech, so I'll tell you what I say. I'm an ops guy. I just want to do things that make sense. I'm a point A to point B. I need to see progress. Art, you could say, Mike, I need to mow the lawn. I'd say, hey, sign me up, because I'll see a start and a finish, and I can look back and see what we accomplished. And that's what I want to bring to government. That when we say we're going to do something, we do it, we follow through. Doesn't mean that we don't flex or change along the way or conditions change, but we can measurably say we've achieved something. And if I have a legacy on township committee, it would just be putting systems in place that allow that to happen in the future. Like after 3 years, you might not need any more Mike Summersgill because we have the systems in place that will allow us to get the results that we're looking for. And I would be happy with that. But we're not there yet, and we don't have the expertise on the township committee at this point. And I think I filled that spot, and I hope to have a chance to show you what it looks like.
Very good. Good. Questions, folks? Don't be shy. Yes. Art?
I'll start it off. It's a question, and listen to you guys. We are blessed. The town is blessed to get 2 candidates of your caliber. And I am totally impressed. Having lived in Maplewood for 71 of my 76 years. Like the forum that we've created here, I'd like to change it a little bit and request a pledge. The 2 of you are so talented and bring so much to what I think our government needs in this community, is that the winner makes sure that the loser plays a role in our government in town here, because the talent I see is phenomenal. So that would be my request. And then my other is that we have a lot of food and cookies and things, more than I could ever imagine. So even if you have to run early, go through that way, take something with you, okay?
Sure. So, Art, if you don't mind if I start on this one. I actually had the same thoughts, and looking back at the last debate that we had at the League of Women Voters, I was struck by Frank's experience with the Economic Development Commission. And I said, regardless of how this election goes, that's probably something we should tap into with Frank. And so I did look and see how our current EDC is structured. Unfortunately, it used to be a citizen group, and then it got eliminated, and now it's just 3 members of the township committee. But I would love and I would support bringing it back to at least adding 1 citizen and maybe 2, so we had 5 people total on the EDC. And Frank, I think you'd be an excellent person for that job. So. I'm hoping you can take the citizen role and not the TC role. But that would be my pledge to you.
Thank you, Mike. No, I want to reciprocate a couple things. One thing I'll mention is that Mike and I actually sat down for coffee a couple of months back. And it was wonderful. We basically said we're going to meet. And we're not going to talk about politics. We're going to talk about each other, get to know each other as people. Because at the end of the day, we're citizens, we're residents, and we have relationships. We have lots of mutual friends, So obviously, it's taxing on some of them, and we understand that, and we appreciate them, just being our friends. But I think Mike's dynamic, and I think Mike brings a lot to Maplewood, and and having him involved, I think this is just basically the commencement. For Mike, and I think Mike's going to be here for a long time, and I'm going to work with Mike on many things that he's already talked about in terms of operations side. I think that's great knowledge and expertise, and what's something that we can definitely race. So if I am to win the election, Mike and I will sit down, and instead of coffee, we'll have a beer, and then we'll talk about what Mike really wants to do, and I'll support that.
Well, thank you, gentlemen. That's
something related to something both of you said. One was economic development and one was process. And my name's John Harvey, by the way. I've been in town for 32 years, owned a business in town, I've been a commuter, seen it from all sides. But in the last 4 years, the frustration for me is the decision-making process around the key economic development, which is the post office. And just 2 quick examples of how it was planned to work and didn't is, there was a requirement in the Maplewood Village Alliance Board that any demolition of a building in the village required an economic impact analysis, right, for the businesses. And it went before vote, and there's one person here that voted no, and that was Fred. And Frank, 2 of the people that endorsed you voted that we would waive that requirement for this developer, which to me made no sense in the world. Right now, there's another issue in front of the planning board regarding outside garbage. And right at a point where the township had said, this is the entryway through the tunnel to Maplewood, and now we're looking, I think Thursday night, there might have been a planning board discussion on it, and putting it there. So we have a process, we put things in place 12 years ago to ensure good outcomes, but then when we come to the face of courage, okay, we say, you know what, we're not gonna require that. And as a former local business owner, you know, obviously I think that was a mistake, but what's the process? So if you could comment maybe on that situation, how you would have approached it, that would be really helpful.
Sure. So, you know, the first thing, going back to actually to, you know, obviously with the post office, and it's no secret that, you know, I was a member of the Village Keepers and thought that, you know, that was a process that, you know, wasn't going in the right direction. You know, having to show financial hardship was key to that, and, you know, eventually, you know, there was a process that was implemented to show that. And then when that began, then subsequently, you know, the Village Keepers stepped aside. But we had to go through a long process to get that done because there wasn't, we weren't following the law, if you will. And you know, and with the dumpster situation, yeah, that's something that bothers me as well. I was at that township meeting. Mike was there as well, and I remember when it came up, it was, you know, you could sense in the room that something didn't feel right. And frankly, I don't think, you know, we should support that. We should definitely look at other ways to get that dumpster inside the facility. We should not give that right away.
Yeah, I mean, on the post office issue, I know that was more of a campaign issue last year, so I don't want to go too far into that other than to say, you know, I didn't support the Village Keepers lawsuit against the town to stop the building from being demolished. I just thought it was a waste of resources on both sides.
It wasn't a lawsuit, correctly, it was an injunction.
One way or the other, there was lawyers involved and money spent.
Yeah.
And my guiding principle is, like, when you get lawyers involved, usually you're doing something wrong with communication and respect. And I think if that had been done right, we could have maybe avoided the lawsuit. We still would probably have the building demolished. I mean, that was going to probably happen. But I do want to speak on the dumpster issue. So that was brought up at the planning board on Thursday, or it was not on Thursday night. I was there. There was a marathon session on land, someone's property they want to divide, and, you know, the neighbors were against it. Property owner wants it, so it went at least 3.5 hours. It was over 11:30. So the planning board meeting will be the next one in November, and I do suggest we all pay attention to it because it's a real issue where the town's proposing to give the developer, you know, our land for a pittance. It's right now it's sitting at $5,000. I think it's probably worth at least $30,000. They're shrinking the parking stalls from 9 feet wide to 8 feet wide, and particularly those stalls for the handicap parking where you actually need more space to get in and out of your car. It's all legal. It all fits the standards, but it's a matter of, is that what we want and who's benefiting from it? And the reality is it's the developer that's benefiting from it. And so it's our land and we control how it gets done. So I do think we need to speak out on that. And I encourage you to find out more about it as it comes up. But these are the little decisions where you have to be aware of what's going on, and you have to look at the impact. And I was out there Friday morning, coincidentally, I was getting a cup of coffee at Village Coffee, and there was a city planner guy, and I don't know his name. People who are familiar with the first post office battle will know, but he's a well-known guy in town. But he was out there with a tape measure measuring, and I was like, this is great. This is a citizen of our town who's getting the info on his own and positioning himself for the planning board meeting. And I was like, that's great. And then, you know, whatever, we talked about it and we laughed because he was at the meeting the night before. But it's great. I mean, that's the stuff I love to see. So hopefully.
One of the things to note on that is that also that vote that came up at Township, Greg Lambert voted against that. So this is a good example that, you know, we talk about, you know, there's all these Democrats on the Township Committee, but yet it wasn't a 5-0 vote. Greg was against the vote. And in fact, in the initial conversation at TC, there was actually going to be no allocation of funding for that space. Initially, it was 0. And there was a huge discussion about, well, there needs to be some type of compensation. And then the arbitrary number that was agreed upon was $5,000, but obviously that was an arbitrary number. And so it's not, to a point, it's not enough. It could be more. But then even when that number was decided upon, it was voted, it was a 4-1 vote.
Okay. John?
My question deals with real property density. There has been quite a movement recently in town to build more multifamily housing. As a result, some people are saying this is wonderful, it's going to give the town a chance to expand, to attract new families and hopefully additional resources. Others are saying, wait a minute, this is going to affect the character of the town to the point where it's going to have a detrimental effect on quality of life, on the school system, on allocation of resources. Whatever we're gaining in taxes, we're not going to be getting back in additional revenue. Where do each of you stand on this trend towards density and why you're taking that position?
Sure. So this is something that's front of mind with me, and you know, when I moved to Maplewood 8 years ago, I remember how excited I was to be able to find parking and just run out and grab dinner or pop in the supermarket or get a cup of coffee. And so I do think that we do have to look at the amount of people that we bring into town and what the impacts are on quality of life, you know, traffic, you know, coming down here, going to the pool, and you're sitting to make that left on Burnett, and it's like the line gets longer and longer, and we've still got, you know, 230 units that are going up there. So when I approach this philosophically, Joan, it's, you know, are we building the town for the people that are here, or are we building it for some future people coming in? And I do think that we have to think about what it is for the residents we have now, and are we delivering everything we can for them before we build properties in the name of development, because we've got land and we've got developers that want to buy it and build. And so that's where I am philosophically. But I don't think that we can just say the town needs to look exactly the way it looks right now, and there's, you know, we shouldn't do any development. But I do think we have to have a plan. There's a master plan, which I guess was written in 2004, updated in 2008, and looked at it again in 2011. But we're 5 years later. I think we're at the point where we should look at it again. And I think to someone's point, I don't remember if it was Art or Kurt, but that we have these processes, you know, we should follow these processes, and rather than relitigate them every time, you know, on a one-off basis.
So a couple of things. One, Joan, thanks for your question. I think it's about 420 units that have been going up, you know, concentrated, inclusive of the Avalon Park over there by the pool. And at the end of the day, you know, we talked about this before, we can't build ourselves or develop ourselves out of our tax burden. Although it seems idealistic, it's not the case. And to your point, you're right, you know, when you put all those units up there by the swimming pool, that is going to have some type of direct impact on Seth Boyden, as well as some of the other units that are being built around there. And so their teacher-to-classroom ratio is going to be impacted. Also, you need a jitney, right? Most of those people are moving here because the idea of the proximity to New York, right? Ideally. And then on top of that, layer on top of that is the cost of these units. You know, it's only 6 units in that are affordable housing. That's an issue as well. You know, how can we keep Maplewood affordable if we're charging an arm and a leg to live in one of these particular units? So in a lot of ways, there are a lot of challenges in the idea of development, just development. And that's what's about responsible development. And what the town needs to do in the future is any type of development or developer that comes to us, first and foremost, you know, and we talked about this before, you know, there has to be a process. And by law, if we ask the developer to get a financial analyst, they have to provide us that through an escrow fund. And then we can kind of look at the finances, look at the numbers, because that third-party person creates a pro forma. And then we can make sure, first and foremost, that they're not any particular you know, tax abatements or pilots or any type of give back. But also we can negotiate with the developer in terms of certain things that we need. You know, ideally, when these units are developed, the idea is that these people are going to actually circumvent various areas of our businesses, and also because there's more density in those areas, that some of our places that have been vacant on Springfield Avenue will say, "Hey, look at all this traffic." So it's kind of like, you know, I can kind of see the process in terms of some type of strategy there, but I'm not necessarily saying that's going to be effective. So we have to think about every time we put a development in, how it's going to impact us in our transportation, how it's going to impact us in terms of our services, how it's going to impact our schools. So, thank you.
Thank you. Mike, I got to take issue with your view that when lawyers get involved, there's something wrong. I think
the lawyers in attendance.
Can I say litigators? Can we try to narrow the group that I affect?
You're still got me. Listen, it's not your fault. I think it's an engineer disease.
Oh boy.
You know, as a lawyer and a litigator, I got involved in the process to stop the dam in the reservation and succeeded. As a lawyer and litigator, I got involved in the process to stop both those and failed. So the Army Corps of Engineers was actually better able to listen to reason than the Maplewood Township Committee. But that's the way, you win some, you lose some. But on the, with respect to the village, and I'm following up on John's question, because I want to hear a little more detail. I know what Frank has to say about this, but I haven't heard from you on it. One of the adverse consequences of this new development is going to be that when it goes up, all 52 feet of it, there are going to be other building owners in the village who say, hey, Fort Jones making money on this thing. It's a nice big building. Of course, that's assuming that the public is receptive. Maybe I can tear down one of my old buildings and build one like that too. After all, if you get one 52-foot building, why not another? Now, I want to know exactly what you think about that possibility, because, quite frankly, as another politician said, people are saying that that's going on now, that thinking. You know of this guy.
Yeah.
I'd like to also hear Frank chip, because I don't think everyone.
All right, you can hear from him. He'll respond, but
let's start with Mike, because the question was put to him.
Yeah, I'd like to know specifically what programs you would put in place to prevent that from happening.
Sure. So I was enamored with the charm of this town, just like anyone else in the village in particular. And actually, I guess most people here were probably around for when we had the blackout in New York City. So the New York City blacked out, nobody could get home. I lived in Hoboken, I had a car because I was driving to South Plainfield. So I actually shuttled 3 people who worked with a coworker home, and one of them lived in Maplewood, and I saw the town. Now at the time I did not know it was Maplewood until I came back around a couple years later, and we looked at the town and said, oh, this was that town that I remember. So there's something visceral connecting us to the feel of the town. Does not mean all those buildings are pretty, right? I mean, it's the businesses, I think, that now I'm connected to than the facilities. With that being said, I would be disappointed if we had the village turn to look like a bunch of JMF buildings up and down the avenue. So I'm not in favor of, even South Orange, they build nice buildings, but it's changing the character of South Orange Avenue. And it's something that, again, that's not what I envision for Maplewood's village. Now, with that being said, we do have a planning board, we do have a township committee, so we do have processes in place where we have a chance to say no to those types of developments. So I'm not promoting any new ordinances or new strategies. I do like the presentation I said the last time that we had, at the last debate, that Mr. Lemberg had put forward on the township committee about formula-based businesses and what, what's the right number of businesses of a certain type, and trying to really put a little more structure around that. And again, my feeling is the time to do that is now, so that we're not arguing about Starbucks versus no Starbucks, or dry cleaner versus no dry cleaner, or is BCB a community bank more than Bank of America is? So I would like to see us do something like that when it's not personal and emotional, and it's more practical. So I do think that that's the direction I would like to go, so that we're not litigating each issue, but we're living within an agreement that we as a community all agree was what we want.
Yeah, so my view on it is that I think it's time to make the village historic district. And being able to do that will basically suppress any ability to demo anything in the village. So we'll have the JMF establishment, and that's it. So we make the village historic district. We subsequently end any extra development, any tearing down, any financial hardship, and it becomes a historic district and is preserved forever.
Can I rebuttal on that a little bit? So
you can respond.
Yeah. I think the idea around the historic district is interesting, and it sounds good because it sounds like we're preserving the character of the village. But I think we should do a little more homework on that, just because in my experience, you do put a lot of restrictions on businesses. And so, Bagel Chateau wants to, redo their kitchen, and now there are guidelines that they can't do it because there's an exposed beam that they would now cover up for their, safety mandated hood. So I do think as a town that it's worth having the discussion. And again, let's have it now before Bagel Chateau wants to redo their kitchen and can't because we have this ordinance. So I do think it has merits, but I think we need to do more homework to make sure it makes sense.
So with the special, it's a special district already, there is a lot of benchmarks in place. So awnings have to be a certain way. There's certain, type of artwork that you get put in front of your particular facility, or your particular business. So I mean, there are already benchmarks in place, and and also in historic district, some of the rules stipulate that you can actually have certain things internally structurally fine. It's more about the external structure. So.
Okay.
So, my name is Dave Helmkamp. I wanted to set the record straight. I was not the guy measuring the parking spaces. But that guy is an excellent example of engagement. Let's just call him Peter for this morning. Maybe an extreme example, but my question is, I've been motivated and gotten involved the last couple of years. Fundamentally, I have a sense that there's a certain, looking for the right word here, lack of connection to the civic process, across the population. And I've never felt that maybe initially I blamed that on the politicians, but I don't at this point. I think it's a question of both citizens and politicians working in a way that can be more inclusive. My question to each of you is, can you think of one or two things, suggestions that would be inroads into increasing the sense of inclusiveness in the civic process to inform some of these issues better that we're talking about? And if you can even frame it in the context of this morning, ranging from high school students through seniors, something that might facilitate any one of those groups being more aware of what's going on and more able to influence.
Sure. So, I'm a marketer by trade, and so my job is to disseminate information through all channels. And although we do have those channels currently, some of those channels currently available to our residents, and we're not doing a good job of marketing the marketing channels. So, for example, our town has an app, but how many people know about or use the app? We have a website that needs to be redone, and it's poorly communicated. We have an email blast. We do direct mail pieces occasionally. But the communication, the dissemination of information leaves a lot to be desired. And I know this too from just talking to neighbors and talking to people on the train platform. A lot of people understand there are 19 committees that we have in our town, in addition to having a township committee. 19 organizations that make a lot of decisions that impact everyone in this room. How do you get on those boards? Who decides you get on those boards? How long is the tenure on those boards? And some of them are very powerful organizations. So one thing that I talked about, and you mentioned the word, it's about transparency and dissemination of information, is to get a marketing campaign together so all our residents know, using the news record, using the Village Green, using the Maplewoodian, using our own channels to get information about each committee, know about the committees, know what they do, who's on the committee, how long they've been on the committee, how you could be a member of the committee. I've been reaching out to residents lately about the Green Team. The Green Team has 6 spots that are open right now, and I've been reaching out trying to get people to join the Green Team. But to be totally honest with you, I'm just not reaching out to any particular resident. I'm reaching out to residents of color, because what's important to me is that not only do we have inclusivity, but it's diversified. And so I feel like we talk about a diverse town, but when you look at those committees, and even to a certain extent Township Committee, we don't see the diversity that we boast about, when we're in New York or at the barbecues, and we need that. But in terms of that information, we need to do a better job as a township of getting this information out about who the committees are, how you can join the committees, when the committees have meetings. The information leaves a lot to be desired. It's fragmented, to be honest with you. And so I would work to put a marketing plan together to have an awareness campaign so that these questions that come up, and we're so reactionary a lot of times, it's because we don't know proactively what's going on.
So I think that it's not the quantity of information, it's the quality of the information. And so I think what I would look to bring to the Township Committee is to frame it in a way that the citizen can understand why this matters to me, what's what does this mean? What does this easement mean? What is an easement? And I also think that I would bring better reporting to the township committee. So if I'm elected to the township committee, you're going to get from me before every meeting, this is my update, my report, and it's going to be a report. And we may not go through everything on my report because of time, but it's there. And then it's going to be something that builds on itself, so that you can see, this is what I said I was going to do, this is what my committees I'm on are doing, and they said they're going to do, this is where we are. And I hope to then drive that behavior into the other members of the township committee. So at the end of the day, we've got something that's tangible that people can understand, and they can understand the issues. And so if the issue that we're speaking on is, the dumpster easement, I'll list out, here's the pros of doing it, here's the cons, and make it, clear so people understand what we're actually talking about, because we're all busy lives, and we don't, I've started living, breathing, and sleeping, township government, but the reality is I've also been on the train platform and never even looked at town hall because I had, my kids and get home for this and that, and it's busy. So I think it's about getting it in a format that people can really use, and then they know what are those flashpoints that they want to get involved in and make their voice heard, so that it's consumable for them.
Yeah, but I think what's important though is, and I want to make sure I resonate this, that our residents don't even know. They don't understand that there are these committees that exist. And so what we need to do as a township committee, or even as a municipality, is do a better job of raising the awareness that how many people know there are 19 committees in Maplewood? Raise your hand if you know there are 19 committees in Maplewood.
I do, and they all
Okay,
have the
there
same
you
people
go.
serving.
But exactly, there you go. So there you go. Thank you. So you can see that right now, I only saw a few hands. That's information that when you're paying all these taxes, you should, and so I just disseminating that information, inclusive of information about what the committee does, how you get on the committee, what its obligations are. What it's taxed to do is important. So I just want to say that, and so in addition to doing those things, but first starting on ground zero and just getting that information out, disseminating information about what this is and why it's important and how it works from a governing perspective, how that all leads up to the township committee, the process.
I'm going to jump into this for a minute because my mother says to me when I start rocking that I really need to deal with why. And something that one of you said just pushed a button for me. We've gotten into this discussion about communication and use of emails and the internet. Not everyone, believe it or not, is on the internet. And one of the things that we've dealt with is we're looking at older populations, that you lose a lot of information and a lot of contact if that becomes your primary focus. When you mention issues of minority communities, African American or whatever, and by the way, not everybody who's black in town is African American. The issue of having some level of cultural sensitivity and being able to work out a process that will communicate to those groups, all of those groups, is pretty critical. And I'm going to challenge both of you and say that I really didn't hear anything from either of you that really addresses a marketing or targeted strategy to do outreach to the broader community. I'm going to say the broader community, because I think there are a number of people that just don't get information. I hate Patch Online, sorry, but I do. That's not where I want to get my information because in many ways it's very narrow. So how do you develop some form of communication strategy? And if you don't have one, I forgive you. It's okay. Okay, but give me very briefly, because I want to be mindful of our time, some response to how you develop a plan to do larger outreach.
Well, if we get more granular, this marketing plan is things that I do in my communications in different languages. So my wife's Haitian, so we parle Creole TBT, and we have a lot of Haitians in Maplewood. And the challenge is that our information is not communicated for the most part in Creole. And Creole is the essence of communication. When I knock on doors and I meet a Haitian man or woman, and I hear some inflection of voice, "Comprendre Creole?" Say, "Oui, you comprendre Creole? I'm bringing a TBT." And then I can still, the broken Creole that I know, I can also have a conversation. The barrier goes down. It goes down big time. And I walk over the door like, and I have a vote, and that's important, because, instead of me assuming that someone speaks English, I'm trying to humble myself and make sure that I make them comfortable, and so communication, logistically speaking, and in my job too, we translate all our stuff in different languages, and that's something that will be inclusive of a marketing plan, which I promise in January.
Let me stay with this. That's a skill. What's the marketing plan?
So the marketing plan will be essentially offline, online communications. We can use the app if we need to for an online side. On offline, we can do a direct mail piece. We can do a direct mail piece that could be a monthly communication or bi-weekly communication, or bi-monthly communication rather, and it could talk about, for information such as meetings, organizations, how to join, so where to call and where to get information. So those are opportunities as well. You want to make sure it's clear and concise, and then obviously you got to watch your costs.
Yeah, we were sat in the same subcommittee meeting on Friday on making age-friendly communities, and I'm sure when your button was pressed, mine was pressed too, and we were talking about, well, we need a unified communications platform, we're going to bring all this stuff together, and I was like, no, that's good for helping manage the process, but that's not good for communicating the process, and I think it was a mistake to move the Maplewood leaflet online instead of doing the print distribution. Yes, there's a cost when you do a mailing. You've got posters and paper and print, but that's how many people want to be reached, is with that mailing. I mean, the Hilton Neighborhood Association, we still get our newsletter, and that's, that gets me every month. It shows up and I read it, or if I don't have time to read it, I leave it on the kitchen table until I do, so it sits there for me when I'm ready to read it. And I think this goes back, and we haven't, I think, spoke enough about reaching out to the population over 60, but this goes back to me where this is a group that if they want print communication, the town should pay for it. The amount of money we spend in other areas of the town, this seems like something that we shouldn't be cutting because there's a cheaper way and we want to be online or have an app, and that's fine for the right population. So so I would go back to print for several things, and I would try to also look at the community organizations that exist that you can work communication through. Irene and Frank and I were at a meeting with the President's Council. I think that was this week too. It's like never ends, right?
Monday.
But it was great. You tap into another organization and you just hit all these people through that channel. And there's churches, religious organizations, service organizations, and I think once you have someone that can coordinate those communications, then you can start to make sure you're getting everybody the information in the way that they want to receive it, and not the way that you want to send it.
Right. So we agree on direct mail.
We're talking about, both of you can respond to this, but Frank in particular, you're talking about diversity. I have been here for 49 years, so it's a long time. I have a lot of history, I have a lot of involvement, et cetera, et cetera. When I first moved here, all of those 19 committees, which I don't know how many were actually there 19 years ago, were populated with a diverse group of people. You had equal numbers of Republicans, equal numbers of Democrats, equal numbers of independents or undeclareds. They're not really independents, they're undeclareds. That no longer happens. 20 years ago, I lost an election here in town. I had a wealth of information, and I became a pariah. Therefore, it's just strange to me. There are members currently on the township committee that would not even speak to me. They saw me coming and they went to the other side of the street, or they ignored me as if I was not there. And I really am a hard person to ignore. But at any rate, this is a whole spectrum of people. And I have to tell you another thing that I'll just tag on here. Having become a widow 2 years ago, I really would like to know how we can encourage small business to come into, or at least cover, Maplewood, because I can't even find somebody who will come help me cut the bloody oak trees out of my hedges, because we've got a bunch of very active squirrels that live with us. And I mean, these are the kinds of things that I face as a day-to-day kind of, I'd love love to be able to stay in Maplewood, but I hate trying to keep up an 80-plus-year-old house because there's not a lot of little things. But diversity is what I want to know. How are you going to get those 19 committees equally represented with seniors, people of color, people of different independent kind of thought processes?
Well, first, let's answer your other question about these squirrels. That seems like that's a big problem for you first and foremost, right? So one thing.
I'm more about the town, the committees.
We're going to get to those
the
too.
Squirrels we can get rid of.
Yeah, we'll talk about that. But it's funny you mentioned that because I was talking with Sheena earlier this week, and Seton Hall has a relationship where they're helping their seniors in town. And
they helped shovel my snow last winter.
That's right. And so what we're going to do is we're going to work closely together and make sure now that, although they obviously are catering to South Orange, we're going to work closely together and make sure to do more work on the Maplewood side too. And so that's going to be.
I live in Maplewood.
Yeah, you're one of the few though. There are many that didn't get that service. You're a lucky young lady there. Yes. So we're going to work hard on that. But in terms of the diversity platform, diversity is inclusive of age friendly. That's part of diversity. Sexual orientation, that's diversity as well. And as well as people of color. People of color is inclusive of Caribbean American, African American, African, Latin American, Spanish American. I did a lot of work with the Coalition on Race on this. And this is a very important organization because this organization is not just about diversity, but it's about inclusion and awareness. And also class diversity. Connie, we should talk about that as well. Maplewood, is a very unique town where we have different class structures.
No joke.
Exactly. And so we need that diversity as well because some of us don't have, say, the amount of income as others. But it goes back to dissemination of information and really proactively reaching out. I apologize that those people on the TC cross the street on you. If I'm on TC, I'm going to go over there and give you a hug. That's what I'm going to do because that's the kind of person I am. But I want you to understand that, I will work desperately to find people that address, and inclusive of Republicans. So if Mike does not win, Mike's going to be on the committee.
Well, he already is.
Yeah, he'll be on another one. This guy's ready to work. And so we'll work hard desperately to find those people. I have a network that I've already tapped for the Green Team, and I'm tapping for other things as well, inclusive of sexual orientation and color, as well as I have people that are good friends of mine that happen to be Republicans. Some of them might be sitting in this room,
well,
and they're supporting me. So there you go. So the point being is that we'll get there, Connie. Thank you.
This is something where it came up earlier in this year, and the Township Committee had passed it wasn't an ordinance, but basically a resolution saying we need to have more diversity in our committees, and we'll work over the next 3 years to do it. I probably would be up for for a shake-up where we looked at the committees and it was almost like a reshuffling, and we look at people's skill sets, interest levels, because I've been on the pool advisory committee. Some people are more or less engaged depending on how many years that they've been doing it. Their lives may change. They may be busier. So I don't know what that looks like. I hadn't thought about that until this question, but I'll give it some thought. But it might be a good idea to just almost like rebid the team, so to speak, and reshuffle it. And I think it was Art that had said, well, Mike has this great skill set. Will you look to include him in the future? He's ready to work. He's got that enthusiasm. And it's actually interesting because I actually had put my name in for the Open Space Trust Fund committee in 2010. And I was actually told by the town that they would not select me for the committee because I was not of a certain diversity that they were looking for. And at the time, I was disappointed because I was ready to work and I wanted to contribute. But I also understand that spirit of you can't have everybody look and sound the same on the committee if you want to reach the most people. And that was basically what my response back to the town was. Like, I understand, keep me in mind if there's an opening, call me. They didn't call until this year, but that actually was Greg Lembich reaching out to the larger group saying who's interested, and I said, okay, here's my chance. They're actually asking for someone, so maybe I'll get on this time. But I get it, but I think that there's some opportunity to shake it up without losing the experience of our older members.
Okay. Just talking to backgrounds. I've served on this Grata Foundation survey that's being done started, I think, sometime in the summer or before the summer when they tried to engage as many people as we can. One of the biggest things that they did to gather their information was a survey. When the results came back, we found that a huge amount of the survey was only done on computers. But they were moving ahead with the next step. My question to them was, if we don't have any kind of information from a large part of the population that does not use computers, why are we moving ahead? Okay. Despite that, we are still moving ahead. Okay? And I fear that what we have not done is include a large amount in the population. When I questioned Town Hall as to why we were not going ahead and finding some way to address the needs of this part or segment of the population that we had not included, their answer was that maybe we should type up a survey, but this time make it in Creole. So I said, well, why would we have to do a thing like that when we can really reach out to people in a different way? Because obviously doing it on computer form, whether it's in English or Haitian, you're not going to reach them. That conversation ended too. So in this kind of engagement, what I've discovered is the kinds of blocks there are to moving ahead in a realistic way with problems in the town. Knowing that, I want to know how you would get some of the concerns of seniors connected to housing advanced in the town. How can we approach both the types of housing we have to live with, the taxation issues, and other types of housing that might be available? And what would be your method of getting those things advanced, knowing what we are dealing with?
Sure. So I think so you raise a good point, and unfortunately the experience I think you and I have had is when you're not getting it from the town, then you go around it. So in your and I's case, it's like, well, then let's just go knock on doors and get the information that way. The Hilton Neighborhood Association puts out flowers by the confectioner's store right on Prospect and Springfield Avenue, and they're supposed to get watered by the I think it's subcontracted service that brings it. And they weren't getting watered, and the Hilton Neighborhood Association members were carrying jugs of watering cans from a business all around. I said, oh, this is crazy. We shouldn't do that. So how do we fix this? So there's a neighbor across the street that's got a hose spigot. Let's buy a 50-foot hose. We'll run it across the street and go water the flowers. But it's like, that's unfortunately what we found as citizens that we're having to do more and more of, instead of holding the government accountable to deliver the services that we want. And to your point on housing and those services, I really envision an advocate for seniors. I think that person should report to the township administrator. I'd even be up for them reporting to the township committee. If we want to make seniors important, we need to elevate that position. And I think, I've had conversations with seniors who were talking about the lower fee for garbage removal. And I was sitting around a table with 4 women, and one of them said, I'm not sure if I've heard of that program, and she clearly would have been eligible. And I was like, that's, let's start by getting the stuff that we're due and have someone go out and advocate for them. And I think that's the same thing on housing. There's tax credits that are available. And it's like, you need someone that connects those dots for this population and is really out there advocating for them. And that's how I think we get at it, by giving it focus and making it someone's full-time job to connect to that population.
Well, first and foremost, I think there's a lot of things that happened lately that are unfortunate for our seniors. One is that we know that the income freeze dropped from $85,000 down to $70,000. And that $15,000 variance has resulted in more for sale signs going up in Maplewood, because seniors now can't afford to stay here because their income level was between $70,000, $85,000, $86,000. So, because you're not part of that freeze now, I know a couple of seniors, unfortunately, they're now moving. So housing is an issue for us. We talk about affordable housing, and we want to have affordable housing. But a lot of the affordable housing is baked into a system that's state required for us to, by the Commission of Affordable Housing, to make sure we have certain units allocated in developments, or if they're not allocated, then the developer gives us funds which we leverage in town. But one thing that we can look into and explore is the possibility of actually taking a developer's development that's being developed and actually opting, or better yet saying, exercising or investigating a way to not let that be inclusive of that CODA event. So what that means is something fascinating. It means that the way it works currently, it's a lottery system. It's a lottery system. So you could live in Morristown and be higher on the list than my friend Jenny, who we've heard about a lot in the Village Green, who's looking for a home right now. She has cerebral palsy, but she's way low down on the list. But if we look at the exercise and explore the process of not including a development in the particular affordable housing, then it goes from being a lottery to a preferred opportunity. And if it's a preferred opportunity, then that's something where we as a town can look at our seniors and other people who might have a need. And so that's something that I want us to explore, because then we can technically provide affordable housing for our seniors. And we as a town will have to go ahead and figure out how to address our quota by state law, but I think it's something we should at least explore with the goal of trying to keep our seniors in Maplewood. And so that's something that's very risque and it's very out there, but it's an idea I'm willing to take to bat because I care about my seniors, because we need that diversity. And one more thing, I do think that we do need representation, in town for our seniors to be age friendly, absolutely. And I think we should have a joint advisory, not just with us in Maplewood, but also in South Orange. So we have this one advisory board inclusive, because, for example, there's a senior jitney program, that's run by South Orange. But I know when I went to one of the Grotto events on June 5th, Irene was there, Kurt was there, like over half the people there, and mostly were Maplewoodians, had no idea about it. It runs Monday through Friday, every week. And on Wednesdays, certain Wednesdays, the first Wednesday of the week, it takes you to West Orange, and the third Wednesday of the week, it takes you over to Target and Best Buy and Whole Foods. No one knew about it. And so that goes back to your point about communication and information. But I do support that. I think that's a good idea. And then, of course, I've talked about this before, shared housing, and working with our seniors to understand how that works. What is the time with it?
Maplewood's Jitney has stopped with making the phone call and setting up.
No, that's still viable, but I'm saying that South Orange has a senior jitney program. You can go on their website and see it. It has all the times, everything Monday through Friday, and then Wednesdays they take you. Connie will take you over
that used to happen in Maplewood.
Yeah, well, not like it does in South Orange.
I'm just mindful of our time. My own comment about this discourse is quotas are fine, but you can always set different priorities and increase those quotas. And the issue of transportation, while communication is one of them, the other thing that we've dealt with in our work with the Grotto Fund is whether or not the kind of transportation is what people need or want. Monday through Friday is great, but what if I want to go out at 8 o'clock at night? What if I want to go to someplace other than West Orange? What if I want to have someone help me from my door to the curb as opposed to expecting that I'm waiting at the carport? Don't need a comment from either of you, but I think that there's a broader set of issues here in understanding what the real needs are of the community and being able to respond to those as opposed to simply expanding something that's not working.
No, you didn't need a comment.
No, I'm not going to even accept a comment. Stay with me. I take that lead because I'm the moderator. There's a question over here.
Good morning. I know Mikey said you wanted to hear from our high schoolers. So my name is Rosanna McCree. I'm on the board of YouthNet, and we provide aftercare and enrichment programs for the middle school, along with other programs and activities at the high school level. So today we have 2 high school students who participate in those programs, Sierra and Kenneth, and they both have questions for you.
Yeah. Could you guys please stand up? You're kind of like...
Good morning. My question was there are limited activities for kids after school who can't afford to pay for these things. I'm fortunate enough that my parents can do that for me, but I was wondering how would you fill that void so that kids can have something more productive to do with their time instead of getting in trouble and doing things that they should not be doing, as well as my thought is that if we are able to achieve this, the educational gap between students in the school systems can be closed. So I was just wondering what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so so then this is a Maplewood debate, but since we have a shared schools service, I will say that the YMCA has a bid in that they just submitted, I think, yesterday, for a facility that's right by the middle school, and I think you might be involved in the services that they're looking to deliver. But so the idea is that it's the old animal-friendly facility, and it's right along the river. And since it's really close to the school, you're going to get a better chance of having people actually take advantage of the services. But I do think the kids in our neighborhoods need a place to go after school. It's not just home. That's one of my favorite things about the library. I love seeing, maybe in a minority, but I love seeing the kids at the library after school, whether it's the Hilton branch or the Memorial branch. But I think that this new facility that the YMCA is bidding on, I would love to see them get that lease in South Orange. It doesn't help us in this part of town because that's all the way, over South Orange, and there's still a need we have there, and there's a debate about the DeHart Center and what to do with that. So I'll flip the other way and say I don't think that the senior center that's in the DeHart Center now should be moved out of the DeHart Center. I think it should stay there. It's more accessible. It's a single level building, whereas the church that they're going to look to move the seniors to is a double level. So maybe there's a chance for that church not become the senior center, that could become a youth center. The challenge with that is getting kids over to that location, and so I think that's something that we don't fix easily. And I'll get in trouble with the moderator. The only thing I want to say about the jitneys is the jitneys themselves are not designed for our older population. They don't have the right seating. And so I would recommend that the next jitney we buy should be bought with senior transportation in mind, even if it's used for commuters in the morning and at evening, but during the day at least make it a friendly option for them to ride, because it's not designed for them. So hopefully I answered your question a little bit and got a little else in, and then I'll give Frank a shot, and then if you want to ask another one.
Sure. Thank you. What was your name again, young lady?
Sierra.
Sierra. Hi, I'm Frank. Nice to meet you. I'm going to answer your question. This is a wonderful question because I really, I'm going to actually let a lot of people know about something that's happening right now in our community that's kind of part of your question. I was approached in the spring by Mr. Jarrell Adams, the former middle school principal here in Maplewood, about an issue with some of our youth who unfortunately, and you know about this, so it's going to be public knowledge now, who unfortunately, because they can't afford the after-school activities, were camping out in the library after school, after YouthNet is over. And in fact,
just to interject real quick, we do provide a lot of scholarships, but again, YouthNet funds are limited, so those who can't provide scholarships, those are the kids that we're concerned about not having something to do.
Yeah, and I'm going to talk more about that. So because of that situation, through investigation, we also found not only didn't have stuff to do, but they weren't getting meals at home.
Right.
So after Jarrell Adams reached out to me, I did my due diligence, and I went and talked to Sarah Lester, who runs the library, and confirmed it. And then I started to talk to other people I knew. So I worked with Diane Malloy, and I started to work with the Hub. And then I said, well, we need to put together a plan to help these youth. And so quietly, I've been reading with Diane Malloy, Samantha Cahill, Kate Cahill from the Men Program, who you know very well. She runs the Men Program at Our Ladies of Sorrows. Our mutual pastor, Father Jim, over at St. Joe's, has been making collections every Sunday as part of this strategy I put together, as well as working with Sarah Lester and working with many community leaders, Missy, who's the head of the rec program, to find a way to address this need. Because even in this great town of Maplewood, where we think everything is hunky-dory, it's not. And so we've been meeting on a monthly basis to try to find a way to address the needs of these young people. And this is the passion that I bring. It's the passion I'm very serious about. This has not been public knowledge. It's something I've been doing on the side, but I'm going to make it public now because you brought it up. Because you're right. All our kids don't have the amenities and abilities of others. And so we have to do ways to find ways. So we're trying to find a way to leverage. Father Jim has done a great job of subsequently helping us get food into the middle school pantry, which we've been leveraging to get to these kids so they have something in their backpacks when they go to the library, have something to eat because they're not getting food at home. Kate is working on a way to get groceries to these parents so that they have meals, in addition to the great work that the Rent Party does. And then also working with Sergeant Mike Pomerazzi, who's part of YouthNet as well. And he has pickup games, does a lot of work, and we're working with him to get other officers to come and become mentors for these kids too, and do pickup basketball games. And as you know, because of your funding, YouthNet has to stop at a certain time. And it's that gap after YouthNet starts until the library closes. That's why they're camping out in the library. You know, and you see the officer, Miss Stoudemire, she spent a lot of time at the high school too, but she spent a lot of time in the library policing some of these kids. And it's not because they want to be there, but they have no place to go. And that's about Maplewood Cares and rising Maplewood up. So we're working hard to use, and the jitney, as you were mentioning, ironically, we're thinking about using the jitney as a way of transportation to get to DeHart Park so that we offer meals once a week for these youth. They have a place to get there. And we're trying to work on getting the parents, you know, obviously permission from the parents as well. So the takeaway is that it's very important.
No, that's not a question for the discussion.
So,
It's source.
okay. Oh, great. Thank you so much.
We'll put his business in.
So you know, I don't mean to go too long, but the point is that this is important. This is why it's about serving our community. You know, we have kids here that need help. And that's what I'm about. And so, yeah, we're going to do some work on that. So, thank you for your question.
And we have another question from Ken.
My question is, would you be able to work with the school district to improve the conditions of our schools? Because some classes have paint peeling off, there's a rodent infestation, and other issues that need to be resolved. So, what would you do?
Let me put you on the spot and ask you to talk a little bit louder so the other side can hear you.
Yeah.
Go ahead, you can do it.
What would you be able to do? Sorry.
It's okay, read it.
Yeah, would you be able to work with the school district to improve the conditions of our school? Because classes have paints peeling off, there's a rodent infestation, and other issues that need to be resolved. So, how would you be able to work with them to improve those conditions?
The question is, what would they do to work with the school system because of the shape of the facility? Paint, heating issues. I'll throw a few more things in there because my kids went to Columbia. So what would you do to address that?
Yeah. Thanks. What's your name, sir? Nice to meet you. Pleasure. So your question is good because it talks about inclusivity and talks about really working out of the silo of being on the township committee. You know, when our residents pay taxes, we're paying taxes not just to our municipal obligations, but also to our schools. And so for a lot of our seniors here, you're paying taxes for kids that aren't even in the schools anymore. So, you know, obviously, you know, that's of interest and great concern. It really starts with having a relationship with our Board of Ed. And that's something that I do have. I've been fortunate enough to work on 2 of the last campaigns, 2014, 2015, with Elizabeth Baker, as well as Chris Sabin, Anne-Marie Manning, and Maureen Jones. And having those relationships to talk about what's important to our youth, but also how we as a township committee can do a better job of bridging that gap and having those conversations about what's going on in our schools. In addition to what Mr. Whitaker talked about on July 5th, that was a disaster. And that needs to be addressed too with our officers. There's no reason for that to happen as well. I know all about it. I'm not happy about that. I've talked to Officer Sally, I've talked to Officer Thomas, and a couple other officers too. And we're going to work on that as well because we need that. I mean, we like to think that all that glitters and gold by making some slang for you, but the truth of the matter is it's not the case. We have our own issues here in Maplewood too, just like any other town here in America. So, you know, what we need to do is we need to understand how that works on the township committee side and give you guys a better voice. I know there's student representation on the Board of Ed, but if you have issues that we need to do a better job of finding a way to make sure that your issues get brought up so that Board of Ed can work and do a better job to get those addressed as well. So, thank you for your question.
Sure. So this is something I think where we do have a real opportunity, and I'm cognizant of the Board of Ed has their remit of what they're responsible for and they control. And so as a member of the Township Committee, I would be more interested in supporting them and providing resources and guidance and help. And so I would try to be as active as they would let me be as far as engaged with the Board of Ed. So if it's just being a member of the community and sitting in the crowd and speaking publicly when there's things come up and then taking things offline, I would do that. If they're willing to have us behind the closed door sessions and also contribute, I would. But there's a lot of opportunities where the town has overlap with the school board, and that collaboration doesn't happen because there's not a chance for it to happen. So the example would be, athletic facilities. You may have the softball field that needs to be, redone, and it's a price tag the school board, maybe can't afford or doesn't want to put resources to, but maybe the town has a need to have an over 55 softball league on Sunday mornings that could use the same field. So you could have collaboration to get that resource. It could be transportation. I was driving by the Board of Ed maintenance facility, and I was thinking, why do we have a town maintenance facility and a school maintenance facility and a South Orange maintenance facility? Maybe there's an opportunity there where we could collaborate and share services. But those kind of conversations, as a student, like they only take place if you're in the room. Like you're here now, so you're hearing something that you can say, I heard them say, and maybe you take that back to school or vice versa. But you got to be present. And so that's my commitment to the town, is to be present for those conversations, to help support it, so that you have a school that you feel happy, safe going to, has the facilities you deserve, and supports you as you progress through the system.
Real quickly on that one to say, I apologize, is that also, there's a hotline that the administration set up for the schools, and I know the parents know about it. Plus, there's a line where you can call, have an issue, and the school board gets back to you in 24 hours, or the school system gets back in 24 hours. I think that's something that should be, and I've heard that it's also available for students too. I think we should get the information to you guys so you can use that communication vessel as well.
It's Let's Talk, it's online.
Let's Talk, there you go. Yeah, so there you go.
We're going to take about another 10 minutes. So for those of you who felt like you have a question that didn't get answered, now's going to be the time. And I'm going to remind you for Art's sake that there's a bunch of food in the kitchen that he would be very happy, even if you didn't eat it here, that you take it with you. I will.
I just have a quick question about the roads. They're really horrible everywhere. I see some streets being fixed. I don't know if you guys have any input or aware of any plans to fix all our roads, because even Orchard, we're on Orchard, and all the roads down on Parker. And even Elmwood. I mean, they're really, really bad. Do you know of any plans, or do you have any input into having that fixed?
So, I am aware from looking at the budget that they do have like line items for road repair, and sometimes they specifically will put which street or neighborhood they're going to focus on. And so it goes back to good facilities management. I have a facilities management background. You need to do regular maintenance. You need to have schedules that you follow. But then you also need to be responsive when people say, hey, this is an unsafe situation and we need to maintain it. So yes, there's absolutely plans to do it. Do they always get done? And you as a resident, do they communicate, hey, you're on the schedule for 2018? No, but that would be nice to know. You might be able to then at least feel like they're listening to you. And they do know that they have, the township app has a feature now where you can take a picture of a pothole and then you get a job number. So you know that you complained on this date, this number, item, so you can follow up on it, which I think is a step in the right direction towards holding government accountable. I tried it, didn't work, but that might have been user error. So I'm not blaming the town for that. But it's a cool picture. I mean, literally, like you pop it in, you take the picture. I have a monster one outside my house that's getting worse. So maybe in November 9th I'll go after that. But is it possible to maybe if the high schoolers have any other questions too after Frank answers this one? Just maybe give them if they do.
And I'll encourage the two of you to give rapid, short answers.
Yes.
We'll
get to it.
Yes. So going back to your, the app as mentioned is one way, and also I think having information is kind of a theme we're talking about. But if there's a plan, we should go ahead and make that transparent so that you as a resident know if you're on this plan, what the projected date is, and then also when the job is done, which I've heard a lot from residents. Or when the job is going to be executed, let 2-3 days in advance. They say they do, but I've heard that that's not the case. And so if it's not the case, I believe it's not the case, no matter what is told to me. So we need to get that done. And then also when it's done, you kind of get some type of ranking. How did you feel that process went for you? So just a benchmark process.
Just a quick comment. I thought the questions regarding the school system were really good because it brings together different elements in overall town planning. And what came to mind to me was the topic of the high school pool that has bubbled to the surface and sunk a few times, and now it seems like it's ultimately sinking. But there was discussion of an aquatic center at the west side of the high school campus, right? Very long-term goal, but as a shared asset between the two towns, very desirable. At the other end of town, we now have a vacant first aid building and a large asset in the parking lot of the pool. So when we think of long-term planning and some of these needs, those are two potential resources, that would both serve the recreational need and the after-school population as well as other things.
Do you have other questions? Because I want to use the fact that you're here, and I don't want you to lose the opportunity if you have other questions you want to ask.
You want to ask about the
Do you know about the hard testing that we do have in the school systems now, with the place the NJS and things like that? A lot of the students are opting out of the test because it is it is optional at this time because they're still working out kinks and stuff. The test is completely computerized, and there are a lot of mistakes on the test when I take it. There are a lot of grammar mistakes, there are vocabulary mistakes, and we're not, I personally prefer pen and paper taking my tests, but the computerized version of this standardized test, it's not working for the students, as well as some students, they are not as consumer savvy and able to type as fast as some other students, so like it would take longer for some students, and some students are just scrolling through the test and walking out because it's not something that they necessarily have to do at the time. So I was just wondering what your thoughts are.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great example of some of the institutional bias that we have in systems, and you have to recognize it's there and then, manage around it so that it's not becoming a disadvantage for somebody, for whatever reason. And you mentioned the part testing, not serving the students. I'd also say it doesn't serve the teachers. My wife's a teacher, and she teaches special ed, and so she's in a unique situation where she's being evaluated on how the progress of her students go year over year. For special ed, that may not be a relevant metric, but she has that same metric. The flip side could be for AP students or the highest performing teachers that do that. They already have students that are getting 98s, 99s on tests, and so how do you move them from a 98 to a 99 is a lot harder than going from an 80 to an 81. So I think that the whole standardized testing thing has to be, I don't know if thrown out is the right word, but I think it's a step in the wrong direction, and you just highlighted some things I wasn't even aware of, or I hadn't thought of, about how you take the test is also having an adverse impact on the students, so thanks for raising that.
Sure, a couple of things. One is, obviously, if you feel like the test is biased, don't take it. That's what I'll tell my daughter too, because there's a lot of biases on the test. It's the type of information that's disseminated. It's also, in a language barrier. It's also those, like in my high school, they taught typing. I don't know if they teach typing anymore in high school. So do they teach typing?
No, they don't teach typing or script.
Well, you're at a disadvantage right there off the get-go. Text messaging doesn't work on a part test, right? So that's a disadvantage. IEPs, which is, for those who don't know, these are, you might know, these are documents where people have learning challenges and they have are learning disabilities, and they have to subsequently be taught in certain ways. And the IEPs, obviously have a direct correlation on your effectiveness on these PARCC exams. So no, that needs to be revisited, and I applaud you for saying not to take it, and we need to look at that a deeper dive.
We're going to allow one more question. Both of the candidates are going to be here for the next 45
I'm hungry,
minutes or so.
I'm going to be here.
I'm going to encourage all of you to get something to eat, and then that's an opportunity for you to have informal discussion with these individuals. And our last question is from Irene.
Could we take two?
Could we take two? Oh, I'm sorry, Fred.
Only if they're concise.
Yeah, gotta be concise.
Step out of office and look what happens.
Okay, mine is more of a comment than it is a question, because I think that it was just this week when we did our presentation to President's Council that I realized that we were missing a real strong link in the schools and how we involved them in what we were doing with Maplewood Senior Share. I guess we were elated when we left the presentation because what we were doing was asking for volunteers with the app that Mike has developed for collecting data of all seniors in town. Both Frank and Mike have already used that app, going to see how the questions they were asking were relevant. And so we want, and we need you to fill out this form and say, yes, you will visit homes with them on, one afternoon. Just give that much. Because we have in just Maplewood alone about 5,000 seniors living in this town. Do we see them here? No. We do not know where they are or how to reach them in an emergency. That's why we have a need to find where they are. Secondly, when you mentioned the transportation that the town has, I kind of would like to piggyback on what Edgar has said because our needs are not to go to the mall once a week or that kind of thing. Our transportation needs are much more relevant. It's getting to a doctor's appointment. It's getting them to schedule that and show up at the person's house to take them. And that doesn't happen. And the third thing is Seton Hall, because we have made wonderful contacts with the sororities and the fraternities, and they were able or willing, willing to come and help seniors. But then somewhere along the administrative level, that kind of plummeted. So we need to be or have an official capacity that goes and makes this connection with Seton Hall. And unless we have that official connection, we're losing out on the help of many of those kids. They were so enthusiastic. And as you said, I did convince a few of them last year and the year before to come and do some shoveling in Maplewood. But we need that official connection. And anyway, getting back to the high school when we were the other day, we were just elated when they applauded these two gentlemen who were there, and the fact that they both have committed to working with us after the election, whatever happens. So we really appreciated that, and it was a mind opener for me.
Yeah, this is in a way a follow-up on Connie's question, because it inspired me to think about this. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but I don't know that this is an issue that has been treated either. I know it hasn't on the town committee while I was there, and I don't think it's in anybody's focus right now. When we're talking about seniors, and you're talking about preserving this valuable resource, it isn't only a matter of getting assistance, financial and otherwise, to seniors. It's also about making seniors feel useful and utilizing their talents. The fact of the matter is, there's a whole lot of talent, senior talent in town that doesn't get tapped. And let's face it, seniors often, and when I become a senior, this will be true, will have spare time because they won't be working. And they can be useful in many ways. But there's not that I know of, outside of the church community, there's no organized way to assess this talent and put it to use in schools and otherwise. I mean, for example, I would be happy to impart my experience as a lawyer and even as a litigator to younger people, but that's not something that's systematically done, and that's a huge. And by the way, when you do that for seniors, yes, then they become more invested, and their quality of life goes way up.
Mm-hmm. So you're on the same page with Irene and Kurt and I, and I'm not excluding Frank, but just from the conversation.
And Frank.
When we were developing the senior app, so when we were going out to knock on doors and find out, what services the person wants, who's their emergency contact, what language do they speak, how do they want to be reached. We also put a spot in there for do they want to volunteer and what's their skill set. And so we're going to build that database so then we know we've got, an accountant, a lawyer, we've got a writer, we've got a photographer, we've got someone that knows city planning, whatever those skills are that they want to share. And so we can start to build that network and then we can tap into it. So that's part of it is collecting the information. But I think Irene had sent me an article that was basically there was a grant or a tax break they were looking to give to seniors who volunteered, and it got shut down in government. And we said, well, we can't control government shutting this down, but we can still tap into that idea of
There has to be a mechanism to put it in place.
Yes.
That's what's missing.
Yes, and that's what we think we built.
That's true.
Well, and just to answer the question too, is that, I know that Kurt and Irene and I, we met way back in February this year, so way back when it was cold again, and we talked about what we can do with Senior Share to really empower our seniors in our community and transcend kind of where we are currently. And we talked about, for example, as part of this overall program we're talking about, is the Block Buddy component of it, which is subsequently identifying these people through the app, but then subsequently as a follow-up is connecting these seniors with a person or people who will subsequently be able to help them take them to the doctor, as you talked about, or shovel their snow if we can't get Seton Hall, and do the day-to-day stuff that they may not be able to do, or they actually, if there's inclement weather, heaven forbid another Hurricane Sandy, that Block Buddy is subsequently accountable and responsible and hopefully available to help that senior seek shelter or seek needs. But we also talked about other things too. We talked about transportation way back then with the Village Coffee that day, and we talked about finding a way to engage our seniors to have them be part of the conversation. So my father is 74 years old, and I talk to him almost every day, and so I have my own personal senior advisor, and he's actually Frank II. And what my dad talks about is he talks about how he loves spending time with his nephew, Mauricio. Mauricio is his nephew. He spends time with Mauricio because it keeps him engaged and keeps him going and babysits. And so what we talked about a little bit back then was the idea of some type of tutoring program, right? We talked about that where we can get some seniors to help tutor some of our youth, right? Who need a little help. Why not? We had to work out the process. And that's some of the ideas that we have. And that empowers our seniors and keeps that juice going fresh.
I have to ask a question, because we're at the point where we ended 5 minutes ago. and I'm perfectly fine with continuing the discussion. I know that people kind of get their juices revved up and want to go beyond. We can go beyond if you like, or we can break, and you can continue individual conversations. What's your preference? Do you want a longer session?
How many more people have questions?
We have at least two.
Why don't you just...
And I think the comments, I'm going to suggest that we not do comments. If we have questions that you want to pose to the two people. Do you have a question? No, I'm sorry, I got into that conversation. Sorry. So if you have a question, fine. If it's a comment, let's, you have a question? Let's do, I'm going to say, this is the final question, and then we're going to break, and people can continue the conversation. Is that, yeah.
And what do you say?
Wait, Joan, I'm sorry. The
Go to
question was
Joan's
over
question,
here.
because mine was more of a comment, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Okay.
What do you see as your role as a township committee member? What do you think the township committee can accomplish? And what do you think is beyond the scope of the township committee?
Good closing question. I should have asked that.
So first and foremost, my responsibility in the Township Committee, I feel, is to represent the views of the town, and that's the widest views possible as far as collecting information. Secondly, I think you need to gather the information to help you make decisions and recognize what you don't know, and then tap into the experts that are in the town. So before I would make decisions, I would try to pull that information in as well. And then the last thing is make sure we do it right. Like if we're going to do it, let's do it right. Let's start. Let's follow through. Let's finish. Report back. And that's your job as an executive. You oversee to make sure that you deliver on what you said you were going to start out to do. Deliver through your people, through your teams. So that would be the kind of the nuts and bolts of what I think we should do. I think we have to be focused on what we take on each year. That would be part of my style, would be to have a plan that says this is our objectives for the year, and everything we do should fit into that marching orders. And that's how you build buy-in and you motivate and you deliver. So the sky's the limit. We've got incredible talent in this town. We've got incredibly engaged people, and if we decide what our priorities are and we go after them, I'm sure we can achieve within the realm of whatever support we can get from the community.
For me, I'm going to go ahead and reiterate what I said earlier. Pedestrian safety. Day one, working on those three things we talked about, right? Enforcement of our laws, traffic laws, empowering our residents, and then also working with our homeowners Also, shared services, doing a deeper dive, looking at the Manto study and making sure that makes sense, and if so, finding ways to implement that, to get that rolling. Also, going back to the idea of responsible development, the idea I talked about earlier, with idea of maybe potentially looking at the position of maybe not doing the affordable housing for lottery and finding ways to empower our local residents to keep them in town. So, those three initiatives are things I'm going to work hard on in collaboration with Township Committee, in collaboration with our staff, in collaboration with our residents to find a better way to get those things across the finish line. And then also something that's a personal and I think an important position of mine is inclusivity. As we talked about before, the diversity, inclusive of sexual orientation, of political affiliation, and as well as ethnic and racial background, and working hard for that. And then to answer your question in terms of things that the Township Committee really has a hard time of answering and really can't fix right away, it's probably going to be right away. It's going to be probably finding a way to deal with state aid and reform of that. In terms of the fact that 58 cents on the dollar is school taxes. Now, I will work with across the lines, obviously, and work with the Board of Ed, and work with Mila and John, and also U.S. Congressman Payne as well, to find ways to help get this process going. But it's not going to happen overnight. So it's a tall task, but we're going to keep chipping at it, because every little dollar counts. That's what affordability is all about. Thank you.
I want to thank Mike and Frank for an informative conversation, lively as well. But I also want to thank Irene and also Joan from Senior Sheriff for providing this forum, and even though he's not here, to Art, who graciously has opened up this facility for not only the regular Senior Sheriff meetings, but for these kinds of activities. So thank you. I encourage you all to stay around. I insist that you get some food, because Art is here.
Yes.
And take the opportunity to have some further discussion with Joan. Thank you.
Thanks for